I guess we're on. Okay. Hi guys. Goedemorgen. Good morning. Goedemiddag. Alsjeblieft. Uh, Thanks for the reinforcement. So, I see some people being in the voice channel. Can I ask someone that they talk, like, I don't know, Guillermo maybe, say hello, someone? I want to see if it works because I'm having my microphone. Hey, thanks. Okay, that worked great. So, for those of you who missed it, either in the first, yeah, well, yeah, I don't have the microphone open here, so perfect. Good. I don't think you're obliged to join the voice channel, but I thought maybe we could try it as an experiment because maybe it's a I maybe it's faster. I think if we also interact from there. If someone watches the recorded tweets, it's gonna be kind of fun, I guess. But what are you gonna do? Uh, Hood. If you hesitate on connecting to the voice channel, I think there's also a limitation of 25 people. Haven't heard about that. Is there? Um, no, there isn't. Okay, that's cool. Okay, we don't have a limit for the voice channel. So, yeah, if you don't talk, yeah, to person, please could you mute your microphone if you don't have headphones? Yeah, thank you. So if you don't have headphones, please mute the microphone. Otherwise, I'm gonna hear myself, or you're gonna hear myself twice. Uh, you're not obliged to join the voice channel. I think it's just easier for everyone. I'll try to say a few things on the Twitch channel if necessary. Uh, you can still use the text channel if you chose to do so. Maybe you can type something on the chat text channel so we know that you are there and you will join us on the voice channel, just so we are aware. Uh, Otherwise, let's just quickly start. Good. We'll have to go quite fast because we are a bit behind the schedule, I guess. Um, Based on something that we said yesterday as well, we had this extra session for those of you who had questions, either for the first or the second class, and for any terminal questions. I think that went well. Maybe we need to do it if we have more questions, I guess. I'm willing to do so. But someone asked that we do a recap, and yeah, we haven't done so many things. So we'll start from the top again today. We'll make a new repository. We'll start working on it now, okay? And yeah, we'll beat on that. I want to also refresh uh, the terminology that we introduced in the first class. So I hope you remember what the repository is. The repository is the big bucket where you have all the different versions stored. So all the metadata, who did what, when did it change, and the actual changes themselves. Those are a big bucket where we just put in repository, and the repository is composed of commits. So every one of those chunk of changes with the name of who did them and the description and the time and the date, this is the commit. And yeah, every time we make a new commit, we throw it inside the repository. Maybe I have a bucket. No, this is the repository. We just drop a commit. Didn't help. Never mind. Okay. We have the workspace, and the workspace is the actual folder upon which we are working. So you have your files. Yes, could you please mute your microphone? G3DAF. Listo, Brett? No. Okay, thanks. So the workspace is the folder. that we are working, the actual folder with the files. So let's say the current state, all the changes that we have done and we haven't committed maybe, or if we haven't done any changes, just the image of the latest commit. And we have the staging area or index. And that's basically when we are ready to submit a new commit. That's where we put the changes temporarily to just prepare the commit. And then when we're done, we just make the new commit. Okay. And later on today, we're going to talk about the remote as well, but not for now. Good. Good. So, oh, I also noticed in the first class, there were a couple of questions on the Twitch channel. I guess by now you know I didn't see them. It was also Hugo who backed me. If you're watching, yeah, that was good. Um, so if you want to make a question, make it on Discord, but I guess you know it already by now. Good. So let's recap the commands we learned in the first class were the git init, where we make a repository. It's git status, where we see the status of the repository. We quickly went to git clone, but we didn't use it. So status is where we see the state of the repository. And git add, I think we saw. So how we add something to the staging area. And git commit, how we commit something. Hopefully you people have also installed Windows Subsystem for Linux, and that will help you with what just happened there. I lost my, okay. So you've installed Windows Subsystem for Linux if you're on Windows, or yeah, at least you figure out how to make things work so we can all work with the same commands. Okay, let me know if I have forgotten anything. And we start from the top. If you have a test project, and some of you yesterday, now you know where you can how you can navigate on your Windows system, basically to go to your favorite folder and to work there. If you have one, you can delete the folder by doing this. Okay, rm does rf test project. That's how you can delete a folder, a directory, through command line. So I'm going to delete it, and then we're going to start from the top. So mkd test project, you can name it as you want. You can name it Stelios to honor me, for instance. Thank you very much in that case. And I hope you see the feed as well, right? Yeah, you do. So cd test project, we go inside and we do git status, and well, fatal page no git repository. That's because we haven't initialized it yet. Okay, so git init to initialize a project. And now you see, because I have this awesome tool that also tells me there's a new repository and this is main. Again, I think yesterday we showed you how you can set up that the default branch is main. Otherwise, this might be master for you. It's kind of okay. But I prefer this terminology to avoid some controversy. And I think it's nicer. So now we do a git status. And we see that we are on branch main. There are no commits yet, and there is nothing to commit, of course, because we haven't changed anything. We did the same the last time. So let's make a file. Last time I had Visual Studio Code, and let me start it again. Code space dot. That's how you can start Visual Studio Code. I guess in most systems that would work. And it will start inside this folder. And I'm going to make a new file. Let's call it main.py. Again, I'm writing Python code, doesn't really matter. It could have been just a txt file because the versioning system only just follows text files and it doesn't really understand what the code does. It only sees lines and compares the lines with themselves, I mean, between the different versions. That's what the system does. So it could be a text file, it could be a LaTeX file, it could be anything as long as it is text-based. If it's a binary file like a video or sound or something, that wouldn't work. Same applies for um, Microsoft Word documents, Excel documents. Those things are like binary files. So in that case, you cannot use Git or any other version control system for that matter. Okay. Let's go. Oh, okay, I'm gonna have to also make this bigger so you can follow. Maybe too big. Chris says code doesn't work for him or her. That's weird. Then in that case, you can just, Chris, maybe you could just open Visual Studio Code and just you can go to File, Open, and then just navigate to that folder yourself. Right? In that case, for me, it was like home folder, temp, and test project. That's where I made it, and then we just open the project there. I hope that works. People are typing. So I'm gonna wait. Okay. I guess it worked for Chris. Yeah, okay. So for Guillermo, I guess Guillermo, that's fine for now. And yeah, for Jasper, when you, yeah, we had yesterday this discussion about the fact that if you use Windows Subsystem for Linux, then your files of Ubuntu are going to be in a different place than your Windows files, and the Windows files you can find them inside -mnt. Chris, I think the palette is when you press Control, Shift, and P. I think that's where you basically see all the commands, right? I think so. That's, yeah, that's or on or on Mac OS, it's Command, Shift, and P. But I guess in that case, you already know. Okay, I'm gonna go quickly to this thing that we said yesterday about um, Windows Subsystem for Linux, just for those people that missed it. Okay, so if you have Windows Subsystem for Linux, you start up with this tilde. Tilde is the home folder, right? Now, Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, they are Unix environment, and Windows Subsystem for Linux is a way to get a Linux environment, a Unix environment, I'm sorry, inside Windows. But Windows are not a Unix environment. So on Windows, when you have your files, you have your C, D, E, F, etc. drives, and then your files are folders inside those drives. Okay. So on Unix, we don't have that. We don't have C, we don't have D. We have one place upon which, below which everything goes, and that's called the root, right? So this is the one. We use the slash, and that's the root. Everything is inside the root. So if I do ls root, just root, then I see those basic folders. That's like the high level that you have. Okay. That's also different from the notation on Windows. On Windows, you have something like this, I guess, right? You have the backslash to denote the different folders, while on Unix environments, you have the slash to denote folders. You start from the root, and then you go below that. Now, when you are on a Windows subsystem for Linux, all your drives are under MNT. So if you have a C drive, which normally you have, then that means that all the files of your C drive are under MNT slash MNT slash C. Okay, so then you could go to program files, for instance. So when you take a path uh, from Windows and you want to transform it to a path to Windows subsystem for Linux, you take something like this, okay? And to convert it to a Unix, you have to prepend it with slash mntc first. Second, you have to replace the backslashes with slashes. So in that case, this one and that one became this one and that one. And if you have spaces at the name, like in program files, you have to prepend the space with the backslash. Okay? That's how you can go to your regular files, which is actually your regular files. The other one is more like virtual environment, or so something like it. Okay? Now, as I said, we're behind schedule, so let's not debug too much about Visual Studio Code and stuff. If you cannot work with Visual Studio Code, you can use any text editor or whatever. So let's go quickly. I'm gonna do the typical hello world example here. Hello world. Okay. Again, you don't have to run this. I'm just running it just because it's fun. It works, so I'm gonna make a new commit. How do I make a new commit? Again, we have the workspace now has one file which is called main.py. If I do git status, it's gonna tell me that this is an untracked file, right? So we're on branch main, no commits yet. There are one untracked files, and this is main.py. That means the workspace has main.py, the staging area doesn't have main.py, and of course the latest commits, which doesn't exist in that case, doesn't have main.py. I think with the add command, this is a way to see it. In our case, this is main.py. We have it in the workspace, but it's not there in the staging area. We have to copy it, and to do so, we need to type git add and the file name. And what is going to happen is it's going to copy that and put it in the staging area. So let's do that. I'm going to do git add main.py. You already see that because I have this clever and super nice terminal. Apologies if my dog invades the stream at some point. Hey, Monty. So git add main.py copies from the workspace to the staging area. If I do git status, you're going to see changes to be committed. And this is going to be now a new file. Okay. So now all I have to do is say git commit. And by saying git, yeah, just make any file. That's okay. You don't have to run the Python main.py. Okay, just make any file. It could be a text file. I guess Monty has invaded. Yes, sorry. I hope you don't mind, guys, that we work with him. So yes, you don't have to make a Python file. In fact, let's just forget about Python, just to simplify things. Let's just rename that to file.txt. Okay, and I'm just gonna say hello world. Okay, still no Python, no anything. It should be plain text. Okay. And git status. Ooh, I should have done that. If you have renamed, you can do this command. Otherwise, just okay. And let's work with git add file.txt. Okay. Sorry, I did it. So again, git add file.txt. And what happens is this. We get file.txt from the workspace and we copy it to the index. So that was before, that's after the command. Yes, last time we did that in the previous course, Caroline. We did git config dash global user dot right. What was it? I don't remember now. User dot name I think was the one, and then you set up your name, and then user dot email I think, and then you set up your email. But if you've done that once in your computer, you don't have to do it again. Okay, that's because when you do the git config command, you say this dash global, which means this applies to your whole computer. So if you did that at the end of the previous class, as we did, you shouldn't have to do it again. For your reference, let me look at that. We had it before. I cannot find it now, but someone posted a screenshot last time that it asked them. It showed the two commands. So yeah. So as I said also in the previous class, yes, 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 Clara. Yeah, okay. So there are two ways to change the configuration, either through that command or by changing the actual file. So there is one file which is called git config, which should be in your home folder. Okay. So again, we said tilde stands for the home folder, and this is the name of the file. It's prepended with dot because on Unix system, dot means there's a hidden file. So on Windows, a hidden file, it's something that is in their properties. In Unix environment like Mac OS Linux or Windows Subsystem for Linux, if you start the name of the file with a dot, that means that it's a hidden file. So you should probably have this file if you run any git config command before, and you can open it with Vim or Visual Studio Code, and that is how it is. Okay. I can show you how it is on Visual Studio Code, for instance. We can open it here. If I go File, Open, and if I go to my home folder, there should be a way to show the hidden files, but I'm not sure how that is. Damn you, Visual Studio Code. Yeah, that's how to do it. Is there a command line way? Never mind. So yeah, you can also open it with as soon as you show your hidden folders in your file browser, you can also open it with any text editor, and it looks like this. And the most important things are those. So this is the user section, and you need to have a name and an email. And if you remember from what we said before in the class, that means that when you submit any commit, the commit is going to say that this is your name and this is your email. Be reminded that the email doesn't have to be the same as the one that you might have set up on GitHub or GitLab. It's something that is stored with a commit. Okay, you can have multiple emails, just one of them you can use them for the commits. I hope that was clear enough. So you can either edit it with a text editor, or you can edit it with those commands that we said before. Global user.name, and then you set up the name, and then git config global user.email, and then you set your email. Those are mine. Well, whoa, that's misspelled. Okay. You do that once in your computer, you don't have to do it again ever for this computer, unless you format or anything. Hood, I hope that's clear. So, to sum up, where we are. It's good practice that you quite often do git status. So we do a git status. Again, we see we're on branch main, no commits yet, and there are changes to be committed. That's the new file, file.txt. That's because we said git add file.txt. We copied from the workspace to the staging area. Now we can commit. Okay. So I'm gonna say git commit, and I have two options. Either I just press enter. It's just git commit, and then it's gonna pop up something like Vim or Nano, or in some cases it might pop up even a GUI editor like yeah, Toporzen. If you are on Vim, press escape and the thing that Clara said. So when you are on Vim, Vim is a beast of its own, and you do colon Q and yeah, these the exclamation mark, and then Q can go. If you haven't changed anything, you don't need the exclamation mark actually. Okay, so Androniki, you haven't initialized your repository, so you need to run git init. That's probably your problem. Maybe you're on a different folder, is that so? Are you sure you're inside on the test project? Proteus, yes, the same as well. So you're not inside the git folder. So for instance, if I go outside, cd dot dot that, right? Can you give us a screenshot? So if I go outside, for instance, now you see I'm not inside a repository, right? Because git status is gonna look inside my folder to see if the repository exists. So let's go inside that. So no, oh, underneath, no. Good. We have three different issues, and let's go one by one. Let's take Guillermo's problem. So Guillermo, this is the easiest one. You just haven't staged the file.txt. Okay. So you should do git add file.txt. Okay. That's it. Now, under Nikki, your problem is that you have created your repository in your home folder, and that folder has many other files, and you don't want that, right? So you want to start a new folder. You want to make a new folder under Nikki. So now you have made the repository. There's one easy way to delete that repository by doing this rmrf.git. That will delete your repository. Be very careful about when you do that. Only do it now because I tell you so. And that will delete the repository. Then you need to do mkdir test project or whatever you want to name it. to actually make the project. Actually, you do have this project, so that's okay. And then you have to go inside this project. So then you know that your Git repository only tracks the files inside the test project folder. Otherwise, you're just tracking all the files in your home folder, which is not something that you want. I hope that makes sense. Practice, you just haven't done any git add so far, and you happen to have two files, file.txt and test.py. Well, I guess you can just remove the test.py. You probably don't need it. Depends on what you want to do, right? I mean, the files that I make, just an example. It could be anything, so feel free to name your files as you want them, and just show you how you can copy the files to the staging area and then how you can commit them. And based on what Clara said, so you can either add one by one the files, so you can just say git add file.txt, and that will copy the specific file. And then in case of Pratias, you can also do the same for test.py, right? Then you can copy the second one. Or you can do git add dot, and in that case, it will copy anything that you have in the folder. Some people say this is not a good practice because many times we said that in the first class, you have things like configuration files and things that you don't necessarily want to copy. And especially if you're working something complicated, many files, contains, and you don't want this to happen. You want to be sure about what exactly you're going to commit. So, but yeah, it's up to you. With git add dot, you will add pretty much everything from here and all the subfolders, everything that changed. So, Luis, that is weird. Yeah. You probably made a repository quite before. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. So, Git status is that if you have succeeded, it's going to say changes to be committed if you have done the right thing. But let's fix Luis's problem. So, Luis, as far as I can tell, you must have a Git repository there. So you have to do this, like cd dot dot slash dot dot slash dot dot slash dot dot, if I got it correctly, 4 times, I think, as far as I can see. And if that's the case, you should then do that, please. Press enter. And then maybe you could show us this, the outcome of this. You can show us a screenshot, that would help. Perfect. So that is the case indeed. So it turns out that you have accidentally did the same as Androniki. So you basically made a Git repository in your home folder. That basically means that everything inside your home folder, all the files, all the projects, everything that you have inside your documents, basically, is going to be tracked by the system, and we don't want that because that means that you cannot even actually make any repositories inside, more or less, but anyway. So, Luis, I want you to do this again, the same thing that Androniki did, because you don't need that repository. So you do rm-rf.git there in your home folder, and then you can just go back to test project. Don't know the exact path, but it should be something para test project, I guess, in your case. And then you do git init inside the test project. So everyone, be very careful when you run the git init command. You should be inside the test project or whatever the folder that you want to start working on. And that should be an empty folder, right? People are typing. I'm gonna quickly do everything just so. Simon or Simon, is that question to me or to Luis? I didn't do it because I didn't run it actually. So. Well, I didn't do it because I don't want to remove the repository from there, but it's for the people that have a repository where they shouldn't have a repository. Okay, Luis, nevertheless, that should be fine. You should have now Git status and you shouldn't have any crap. Yes, that's okay. You hear me. Uh, okay, Luis, if you do Git status, do you see something like changes to be committed or something that you don't see like a bunch of files? Hopefully. Hopefully everyone is fine. Perfect. So everyone should see this. You should type git status and you should see on branch main, no commit yet, changes to be committed, new file, and then the file name of the file. Could be the main.py that I did before, could be file.txt, whatever you want it to be, right? I'm just giving examples here. It can be any kind of a text file with any name, okay? Again, you can name the file Stelios if you want to underneath because I'm awesome. Oh, I didn't say so? I forgot. So, yeah, we did git status, so now we are ready to commit, right? Why we're ready to commit? Again, remember, this is because, well, not one thing. This is because the staging area is going to be our new commit. Go down there. This is because the staging area is going to be our new commit. Okay, so what that says, changes to be committed is basically shows us the image of the staging area, and that contains our new file. So we do git commit. So Theo, what is the image? What do you get if you say git status? Okay, Jake, should I call you Jake? I don't know. Um, you haven't made any file, so you have to make the file either with Visual Studio Code or Vim or whatever. You can do something like Vim file.txt if you know Vim, or you can just make a new file as we saw with Visual Studio Code. Like right-click, new file, you name it somehow, then you save it, of course. Or as Clara said, that's test.txt. That would make just a simple empty file. And then if you do git status, you will see that this is an untracked file. Then you will have to do git add whatever the name of the file is, test.txt or file.txt. So everyone who is in the same state at this changes to be committed and the green thing, don't do anything. I'm going to redo everything from the top, just using command line. So as a recap, okay? So I'm going to delete the whole thing that we just made. I'm going to make the test project. I'm going to go inside the test project. I'm going to initialize the repository. Now that's done. We only have to do this once. Never again. Now the project is set up. Now we're going to make the new file, file.txt, I'm going to call it. I'm going to do git status. So I'm supposed to see that this is an untracked file and it's in red. Then I'm going to do git add file.txt because I want this now to be tracked. So I want it to become green. And then I'm going to do git commit, git status to make sure that it's actually added. See, before it was an untracked file. Now it's something that is going to be committed. And then I'm going to do git commit to commit it. So with the commit, we have two options that we said in the previous class. That means git, we either just do git commit. Yeah, Clara has a point that if you actually read this clearly, you will understand what happens. Okay, try not to focus only on the file names. Try to see what it says. Right? It says untracked files, and it also tells you how to include them. Right? It gives us actually the command that we could have used, git add and the file name. And then it says git changes to be committed, and it actually tells us how we can unstage them, how we can remove them in case we just accidentally add them. Okay, so let's do a commit. Two ways to do so. Either just git commit, we press enter, and it's going to show up any text editor. It could be Vim or Nano or even Visual Studio Code. It could be GUI. You can change that to the configuration. I'm going to look it up during the break that we're going to have soon. I'm going to show you how to do so. But if you want to avoid that, we can just do this. So just type -m, and then in double quotes, you put the message that you want to put. Works the same. The only limitation is you cannot have multiple lines. You will only have one line for a text, for a description of the commit. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do git status. And now you see that I'm on branch main and there is nothing to commit. That is because with the git commit command, so remember how we copied the file.txt from the workspace to the staging area or the index with the git add command. Now with the commit command, we basically copied the stage area. We took the staging area and we made a new commit, right? So in this example, we had two commits, two commits, and git commit saw what there is in the staging area and made a new commit with this image. And it also moved the main branch and the head to that branch. Hope that makes sense. If you start thinking of the history of Git as a tree, everything makes sense in such a way. Every time you make a new commit, you take the staging area, you just add the author, time, message, and everything, make a new commit, and then the current branch upon you are just moves one step to that one. Okay, same as the head, which points what's the base of your next commit. It's 11:30. We are even more behind the schedule than I thought we would. So let's do another commit just for fun. Okay, let's add a new line. This is an empty file.txt. So I'm gonna write hello world. I'm gonna save. Command S, file save, whatever. Okay. And I'm gonna go back to the terminal. And I'm gonna do git status. Now, this is not an untracked file anymore, right? Because we have added it before. Git knows file.txt. It has an image of it. It's an empty file called file.txt. And instead of saying now that, as it was saying here, untracked files, it just says changes, not stages for commit. So what that means, it says, whoa, I knew file.txt, I knew it was empty. Now I have a version of file.txt, which is actually having a line. And in fact, if you wanted to, that's just a tip, you can just type git diff, and that will tell you what are the changes. I'm not going to explain now how to see that, but more or less it's something that you can look up on yourself. Okay, so again, git status says changes not stage for commit, which means we have something new. So let's add this new again. So we do git add file.txt again, the workspace file.txt, which is different than the stage one. We're going to copy that to the stage one. Okay, now it's there. I'm going to do git status, and we see the exact same thing as we saw before. Changes to be committed. That means that the staging area has something new compared to the head, right? Compared to the last commit that we knew. And then we do git commit again. And I'm going to say something like add hello world text. You can use any description that you want. Okay. Now, where are those changes? How can I see the history? I can see like through git log. And that should give me 2 commits. That was the first one on the bottom, the initial commit, the first description that we said. And that's the second one, which says add hello world text. For every commit, we can see the ID, which is a hash, as we said, the author, so the name that you set up in the configuration and the email that you set up in the configuration, the date and time of the commit, and then the description of that. Okay. So this is the latest one. And you also see that it says head and main. So that's pretty much what you see here. We have one commit and a second commit, and in that second commit, main is pointing and head is pointing. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Let's hope you all have the same thing. You all have 2 commits there. I would suggest that we do a break of 10 minutes now, so we can move on, because we basically just did a recap of the last time. So people, you can just go grab a coffee if you want or something. I'm gonna look up for any um, questions. Guillermo has one. I get this message even though I have done. This Guillermo, there might have been something wrong. I don't know if you installed Ubuntu since you did the git config thing, so maybe you have to redo it. Uh, okay, let's have a coffee break, and I'm gonna discuss this through the voice channel. Okay. We are back. Okay, we are definitely behind schedule, but that's okay. So we said in the break, during the break, that we are going to give you a brief introduction into Vim. That's basically because some of the functionalities of some tools is also similar to Vim. Um, I hope you guys hear me. Type a yes quickly. Let's go. Come on. Yes, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to show you how Vim works because that's also the same way where how other things are working. So some of you, for instance, got stuck in Git log, and that's because Git log has a similar concept to Vim. So if you do git log and you have a very long list, then that will just not just split the log, that is going to actually give you a list and it's going to wait for you to exit. And the only way to exit is by pressing Q. And this is working the same way as Vim. So let's do some basic things about Vim. I have this file.txt file, and to open it, I can just type Vim and then the file name. In some cases, you can have VI. It's pretty much the same. Vim is supposed to be newer and more complete. If you don't, if you type vim file.txt and it doesn't work, then try just vi file.txt. Okay. And so let me just put some things on the side. So this is the same file that I have in Visual Studio Code. You see, this is hello world here. This is hello world there. And now Vim is supposed to have this idea that you could definitely, you basically avoid moving your hands as much as you can. And while most people are moving around by pressing the arrow keys, um, you can move around by using some other keys. But yeah. Oh, by the way, you might not see all those fancy things that I have, but that's because I have installed some extras. But yeah, if you're interested, again, same with the Oh My Zas, maybe I could guide you into that. Anyway, so the idea with Vim is that you are in different modes. And when you enter Vim, is you are in normal mode, as it says at the bottom left. I'm not sure if that's as prominent to you as it is in my setup. But anyway, when that's the default mode, okay? Wherever you are, if you get into any other modes, there are many modes, but if you get to any other modes, you can just press escape or control C and you will get back to normal mode. So the idea is you're in normal mode, you move around and you can do things before you want to do any things. And then you enter in another mode. One mode, the most common one, is the insert one. So where you actually can add stuff. So if you type any letters now, like A, for instance, well, A is a special one, so don't type it. But let's say you type K or J or H. Those are actually not doing anything because you're in normal mode. You're actually moving your cursor, and that's something else. So if you want to type something, you have to press the I button. That takes you to insert mode. Now, if I type anything, it's actually there. Okay, it's actually getting added. So to get back to normal mode, I just press escape. And you see now I'm in normal mode. Again, if I type HAK, etc., I cannot write. And there are some other things I can type here, like the undo with you and things like that. You don't have to learn those things now, just so you know. And then when you want to exit, you just press colon and Q, right? This is if you want to exit as soon as you haven't done any changes. If you have done changes that you want to save, you have to type WQ. that will save the file, W means write, and then quit. Q stands for quit. If you want to quit without saving any changes, then you have Vim is going to complain that you have made changes, but you are not asking me to. You're asking me to leave without saving them. So then you just have to add an exclamation mark in the end. Okay. So let's just do this once. I'm going to go to file.txt, and let's say we want to add another line. Okay. I can just press I, use the arrows to go to the end of the line, press enter, then I can type a new line. This is a new line. Then I'm going to press escape because I'm in insert mode and I cannot do anything else. I want to leave now. So escape. Now I'm back in normal mode. And I'm going to do colon, W, and Q. Colon basically means that I'm going to actually give a command, a specific command to Vim. Okay. Yeah, so Androniki, that's because probably you pressed something, just press escape. And then you go back to normal. So if you see any spooky things, so they're like normal mode, recording mode, visual mode. If you see any weird modes that you are in, just press escape to leave as soon as possible. So you pressed escape and it didn't work. Did you try with escape and with control C? You can just try control and C. That should be fine. If you type semicolon, colon, I guess you see it written on the bottom left, right? So you should be. So I'm gonna save and quit. I'm gonna show it once again for Androniki probably. I guess you had an empty file. So I hope it worked for everyone. Same as we said before, you can open a file with vim file.txt or the name of the file. Then you can move around with your keys, the arrow keys, I mean. And you can move the cursor where you basically want to add something. If you want to add to one third, you can go to the end, press I, and be very careful because the cursor is actually before the letter that you are. So you want to press one more to go to the end of the line. Press enter, add something. Like this. And then you can press escape to quit. And then you can just either WQ if you want to save that, or you can just Q and exclamation mark to just discard it. I just discarded here. Okay, and then he's excited. Yeah, we fixed that. I guess it worked for everyone else. So why is this kind of important? You have something like Vim in read-only mode. This is another tool. don't worry too much about that, but this is called less. And why I'm showing you that is because if you have a long history in your Git log, then you will end up at this place where the history is waiting for you to respond, and you can go up and down with your keys. Here I only have 2 lines, but people might think out it's like I cannot exit if you press escape, it doesn't do anything. Control C neither, because this is like a Vim environment as well. So the way to exit from this environment is by pressing Q. It's as simple as that. Maybe actually if I went to like something with a long history, you see I have this thing, right? And I'm stuck here. You see how on the bottom left I have the column? That basically means that it's the same as with Vim. It expects for me to just say what I want to do with that. So Q is how we escape this environment. And now we're done. Okay. I hope that gets out of the way. So I ended Vim, if you remember. I added this new line here. And then, oops, sorry. And now, of course, if I say git status, it's going to say there are changes not staged for commit. Okay, it says that file.txt has changed. As I said before, you can use git diff to see the changes. Again, I cannot go too much into detail about how that works exactly, but you can look it up. And as we said, we add the file and we commit. So the workflow is we change something, we add the files that we changed and we want to commit, and then we commit. We change, we add, we commit. We change, we add, we commit. We change. WQ to save. Okay. We add and we commit. If I do a git log now, I see the whole history, right? Now, one of the things I want to point out at this point is that it's kind of important that you learn early that the best practice of Git is that you do commits, that you commit often, and that you have informative messages. So don't try to like do multiple things like in days or even in hours and then commit. Of course, every commit should be a complete change. So if you were fixing a bug, it's good that, I mean, every individual Git commit makes sense. It's something workable. But it should be small enough so that you can summarize everything in a short message. And one of the best practices of writing messages is that you start with the imperative form. So instead of saying something like added or adding a new line, it's better that you just say add a new line. We also say it saves some characters and it's supposed to work with some other things that we are going to look later on. How Git can join different messages when there are some more complicated functions. And it's also common sense in the community, more or less, so that's kind of consistent between different projects. So try to have clean and descriptive, but also short and concise messages when you commit. That's the bottom line. I think in that case, I managed to do so. I mean, you can look at that and it says, well, the first one is normally we just call it the initial commit, normally it's just empty. Then it says that I added a hello world text, kind of clear. Then I added the second line, relatively clear. Then I added the third line. relatively clear again. Well, if you have a meaningful project, of course, the description should be more meaningful themselves, right? It's like I fixed this issue or made, let's say, the script will work faster, etc., etc., etc. And now that you are such masters at Vim, you can just do git commit when necessary. Let's actually do that. Let's make another change. But actually this time, let's create a new file, right? So let's see where we stand. We have one file, file.txt. We added it. We added a line of text. We added a second line, and we added a third line. Now let's add the second file. I'm going to go back to the main.py. I never learn. So I'm in Vim environment. I press I to type, print hello world. I press escape and back to normal mode. I'm gonna press colon, W and Q. Sorry about that. But no. So, sorry guys. Okay, you're welcome. Well, you know, the course just became less boring, I guess. Oh my God. Thanks, guys. Thanks. Okay, let's go. So, I come on. Sorry, guys. It's just so stupid. Sorry. Now you know I suck. So, git status. We have the new file. Come on. Git add main.py, right? Because it says it's an untracked file when you set git status. Git add main.py, git status again. It's kind of a good practice if you press status, if you type status before you start and before you commit. So after you add a lot of files, make sure that they are actually added. So you're pretty sure before you commit that you did the right thing. Okay. So I added main.py. It's going to be a new file. That's what it says here. Changes to be committed. This is a new file. I think if we go back, you can notice the difference between that and what we're doing git status with a file that was already there. And in that case, it was saying modified. Okay, remember how we had file.txt, we just changed that. And Git was clever and I was like, oh, I know file.txt, it's just that now I have a new version. In that case, I have a new file. And so we are ready to commit, and now I'm going to do a commit through Vim. So if I don't do -m, you will most probably end up with Vim. Okay, hopefully. And the useful thing about that is actually it gives us the outcome of git status below, so we don't have to type git status. And everything that starts with this hash symbol, well, it's not going to be part of the description, so that's fine. So I can say add main.py file. And the good thing about using Vim is that I can have multiple lines. So if you have some change that cannot be described in like a few characters, let's say that we added main.py for a reason and we wanted to say that. So I can say, I can go to insert mode and start saying add main.py because this is something we are going to need in the future, etc. So if I start typing too many things, then the message becomes so long and it's not really useful because many times when you first look at the history, you want to see, we want to glance through what every line does. So it's a good practice that the message is like about 60 characters or 70 characters. I don't remember the exact length. So try to avoid making more than that pretty much. So if you have more things to say, you can use the first line as a title, let's say, add main.py for the future, let's say. Again, that's not the best title. Something more descriptive could be fine, but I trust you can figure it out. And then if you need to explain things in detail, yes. You mean Vim? Uh, Git commit, right? As soon as you have added something, you have a change, just git commit, and it opens Vim. And it opens Vim, and the outcome of git status is going to be below. Okay, perfect. So I press I for going into insert mode, and I'm going to say main.py, add main.py. And because I want to explain why I did it, let's say if I think that it needs more explanation, I can just leave an empty line, and then I can start pretty much saying the story of my life. So added main.py because from now on we are going to do some awesome Python scripting. Think of it as an email, more or less, where the first line can be the title and you leave an empty line, and then you can start writing paragraphs. And if I need it even more, this is something we have been discussing for a while. That's it. Okay. Well, more often than not, you don't have to do that, and many people just rely on just writing just one line. That's kind of okay. But many times, if you have a big project and it's something complicated, and if you think that the code is not self-explanatory, you might actually exploit this functionality, so you can inform others about how to do what you did. So when you write a message, try to think of what others would understand, and if you think they would need clarification, or even yourself in the future, in 6 or 7 months or in a year, you might not remember why you did something, so maybe you add some extra description. Okay. So I'm still in insert mode. I'm going to press escape, colon, WQ, because I want to save the message. If at any point I wanted to quit committing, then I could just do the Q and exclamation mark. It's the same as discarding the changes of a file. In that case, Git is going to see that I didn't do anything regarding the message, and it's going to just not commit. But if I really want to commit, then I just do colon WQ. Okay, I press enter, there it is. And if I do now git log, I have this wonderful message here. You see the title, let's say, and then the actual content. Okay. I hope that's clear enough. Any questions you have? Doberjon, what do you mean? You can either tell us or send us a screenshot. Okay, so Doberjon got Nano instead. So maybe that's the case for others as well. Yeah, well, yeah, okay. So guys, do you see on the top left, you see GNU Nano. It says that's not Vim, that's Nano. That's interesting. So it turns out Windows Subsystem for Linux actually comes with Nano as a default. Well, Nano is much easier actually, because with Nano, you can just press Control X, and then it probably, if you haven't changed this, let's say I change something, you press Control X, and then it says on the bottom, you see it says Save Modified Buffer, and then you either say yes if you want to save it, or I mean type Y if you for yes, or N for no if you don't want to save it. So that would have been the same as Vim, where we either type colon WQ if we want to save the changes before we quit, or colon Q and exclamation mark if we want to discard them. Okay, let me check. I was supposed to do it during the break, but we had the discussion, so um, I hope that's clear enough for now. Uh, so yeah, if you wanna set Vim as your, do you have Vim by the way, or VI? Konstantinos, GEO1001, is that Yorgos, Yanis, whatever that is, and Mandri and Duberson. Does Vim work for you? Okay, so then in that case, I think you can just do this. Uh, and maybe if you do that, let me check again the command. Then from that moment on, you will have Vim. Sorry. Yeah, I'll have to check with me quickly. Try. Yeah, I guess it should be working. Okay, perfect. So it works for you now. Yeah, you can use Nano as well, whatever works better for you. So cool. So with what you know so far, you pretty much can replicate what we said as the linear evolution of things at the beginning. Yeah, that's real. GTA DAF, is that your voice or Yanis? What is that? Or your yeah or what? Just sorry. Um, your voice. Perfect. Um, so so what with what you know so far, you can basically do what we showed as the linear evolution things, like this, right? You change, you add, you commit. That's the initial commit that we made. You change, you add, you commit. That's the second commit where we actually added the text. You change, you add, you commit, etc., etc., etc. Now, let's start seeing towards branches because that makes sense. I'm going to skip one command that I have. This is the checkout command. So as soon as you have the the commits, you can go in between them, right? So you can go back in history and see the image, the project as you had it at some point in time with the checkout command. We're going to skip it now because we're going to use it after we make the branches. Okay, so let's remember what the branches concept is. And the concept is that you end up with something like this. Okay, you're gonna have one branch which ends up in one commit and another branch which ends up in another commit. That's probably because you want to experiment with something and you're not sure if you're going to work with it. This example is a pretty good one, right? Let's say we want to experiment with something. That's the main branch that we have now, let's say with 4 commits. And then we are going to make one branch in which we're going to do something experimental. Okay. So how do we do that? So there's the branch command, which makes a new branch. And if you remember what we said before, basically a branch is just a sticker and a name, a pointer with a name to a commit. So main is basically just a name that points to the specific commit. In our case over here, I'm going to discard the changes, so please don't look at it, sorry. Delete everything, look at it. Okay, so if I look at the history, you see that main is basically pointing towards this commit. And this is the commit C77850CBE, etc., etc., etc. And let's say we want to make a new branch. How do we make that? That's with the git branch command, where we just say git branch and the name of the new branch. Okay, let's start with this example, new feature. So I'm going to type git branch new feature. Now, if I do git status, it still says on branch main. And what does that mean? If I do git log, you can see that here at this commit now, I have both main and new feature. So I have two branches that end up at the exact same commit. That means they have the exact same history. That's because I haven't committed anything new to any of those. So at this point, you might think there's this ambiguity where I'm not sure if I commit. Am I going to commit to the main branch or am I going to commit to the new feature branch? So here's what the command did. I had only main and I have new feature. So regarding this question of like, where am I going to submit? That is where git status is going to tell us that I'm still on the branch main. Now, why am I on the branch main? Remember when I said about the special head thing? This is the one that points to the branch that I'm working in. So if you go to git log, you see that head is pointing towards main. That means if I do anything, if I add and commit, I'm going to add and commit to main. If I want to do so on the new feature, the new branch that I just made, then I have to check out. Yeah, that's okay, Theo or Jake. Theo or Jake. If you have master, that's what kind of okay. Please switch to main. But if you're interested, I can show you how to rename branches at another time, not right now. So how you switch between branches? Yeah, it's just the name. So branches are just names, guys. So doesn't matter. You could call them whatever you want. Just that we try to keep the names in such a way that they make sense. As we said on Wednesday, Git by default was naming the default branch as master due to the late things that we see in the world, and people understood that master is kind of not nice word to use. So we're switching towards main because it's nicer to some people. And anyway, so I'm using main, you might use master, doesn't matter, and you might name the new feature, the new branch, whatever you want it. It's just a name, it's just a tag that you have to have there just to remember where to go when you're working, okay? So now I'm on the main branch, and how do I go to the other one? This is where I use the git checkout command. So the checkout command that we saw before basically moves head from one point to another. Now what that point is, in that case, it could be the branch. So I'm here and head is pointing to main, but because I want to commit something in the new feature branch, I want to make head pointing to new feature. So I'm going to say git checkout new feature. And if I press enter, not only you see my fancy terminal, well, saying now new feature, but also if I do git log, you'll see that head points to new feature. And now main is the pariah who is not, we don't care about at all right now. And you also see that I'm at this environment where you need a queue to exit because I have now enough commits. We have some question by Jasper. Jasper asks, what's the difference between checkout and suites? Haven't heard of suites in my life. I'm not sure what is that, a Git terminology, something new? As far as I can see from the documentation, it seems like suites is some kind of experimental command. I don't know. I've never heard of suites, to be honest. Yes, Caroline. So with Git checkout, you can ask Git to go anywhere, right? So you can either say the name of a branch, or you can say the ID of a commit. So you can. I'm now on new feature. So if I want to go work on the main branch, I can go Git checkout main. Now I switch to main. If I want to check out to a new feature, I mean to move to switch to a new feature, I go Git checkout new feature. Okay. So what does that mean? It basically means that it takes head and moves it from one branch to another one. And why is that important? Because based on head, Git is going to decide which branch is going to proceed, right? Okay. Thanks, Anna. Okay, that's a good question. Thanks, Lars. Um, well, the question is if it copies the entire test project. Um, so, kind of, Lars. So, remember how we said we have the workspace, we have the staging area, and we have the repository. And the repository, you can think of it like having multiple workspaces, right? Every different commit is a whole snapshot of your workspace as it was back in time. With checkout, basically, you switch the branch, but you also switch the workspace to be at the same, to have the same status, the same files, the same image as the snapshot that you're looking to. Okay, I'm gonna give you an example. So now if I do ls, I have two files. I can go back in history actually, and I can go back to the, let's say the initial commit. So I'm gonna copy this ID, and I want to check out there. I wanna tell Git, please take me back in time as it was at 11:30. So checkout can work both for branches and for specific commits. It's not a good idea to go to specific commits. Now that's why you see all this thing. It complains because it's like, whoa, 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 this is spooky. It calls this detach head and it's super annoyed. If I do git status, it's gonna complain again. Head detached and it's like, whoa, it's a disaster. That's why it's red. It's not such a big issue, but anyway, if I do ls now, you see main.py is lost. Well, it's not entirely lost because remember in the bucket, there is still the version, the latest version of our history. where main.py exists and all the changes that we had since then exist. It's just that because I asked Git to take me back in time, the workspace has taken the image as it was earlier on in time. If I do git log though, well, I have to do git log, sorry, main, then I'm going to see the whole history. Okay, actually, I think you can do git log on, and that is going to show you all the history. Otherwise, if you don't specify anything, any specific branch, or if you don't say git log test as all, then it's going to try to go back in history from the current commit that you are. Remember how we said that this is a graph and you populate the graph by going back in time because you can go forwards in time? That's what this does. So I want to go back to new feature. So I'm going to go git checkout new feature and see how main.py is now back. So I went back in time, my workspace, Git looked up in the big bucket with all the commits. It's like, okay, how was that commit? Oh, it only had file.txt and it was empty. So I'm going to make his folder to look like that. Then I checked out back to new feature, and then Git again was like, oh, new feature is pointing to that commit. That commit has both file.txt with those lines and main.py with those files. I'm going to make his folder look like that. I hope that kind of makes sense. Okay, so now I have a new branch, but again, if I do git log, all I see is this. One tip is you can do git log dash graph, and that gives you this nice line on the left where you can see the diversions. For now, we don't have them because everything is linear, but we are going to make a diversion now, okay? So in the new feature, we are going to experiment with something in main.py. So let's just go here. You can use Visual Studio Code. Actually, let's use Visual Studio Code just to make things easier. Okay, so I'm gonna close file.txt. By the way, Visual Studio Code shows you here the branches and everything, and it basically you can do many things about Git in Visual Studio Code itself, but I'm not sure if that's a good idea. Personally, I find it a bit confusing, so it's up to you to learn how to work with Git in through Visual Studio Code. Okay, so I'm gonna add a function here, whatever, and this goes like that, and something. This is just work in progress. I'm gonna save that, and I'm gonna do git status. It says I'm on branch new feature. Main.py has changed. Let add this change. As we said, we made the change, we add, we commit. When I commit, getting into reset mode, my message is going to be something like add a main method, escape, colon WQ, enter. And now if I do git log test graph, yeah, that's a good point. So you see on the bottom left, you see the branch. So yeah, it might be a validation for you that you're working at the branch that you want. Actually, Visual Studio Code does very nice things to annotate things that have changed and things like that. I can show you maybe later on. But for now, let's do again git log test.graph. And now we see we don't have any diversions yet, right? Because it's still a linear thing. The only difference now is that new feature is just one commit ahead of main. Okay. So no diversions yet. We've added the main function, but let's say we want to go back to main and fix the bug. So how do we switch between branches? Again, git checkout main. If I do that, if I go to Visual Studio Code, notice how the main function has gone. It hasn't been really gone. It's only that now I'm on main, and main is not aware of the changes of new feature. If I go back and I say git checkout new feature, now it's back. Okay, I'm gonna go back to main. It's gone. So let's change something in the text file just for fun. So I'm gonna delete the 2 extra lines in the file.txt in the main. I'm going to git status. It says file.txt has changed. I'm going to add the changes of file.txt. I'm going to commit. I'm going to say remove useless lines file.txt. Escape :wq. Good. Enter, and let's see what the log graph says. But it doesn't show the other one. That's because we so as I said before, when you say git log, it's going to look at the current branch that you are and going to look back in history. Now at this point, main and new feature are 2 different branches, and basically new feature does not belong to the history of main. That's why it's not being shown, because it starts from main, goes back in history, and never finds new feature. So I need to do git graph just all. That way, it's going to look for all the branches that exist and going to populate a graph with all of them. And now notice how I have this branch here, this diversion of history. So I have main, I have this, which is like the common commit between the two. A new feature is in the new branch. It has its own history. Okay. Okay, I guess I'm too fast. Well, I'm going to ask for questions right now. So some of you, I guess, have been left behind. Any questions? Doesn't matter. Just do whatever you want, right? I mean, the point of the branch is that you just do something different than the other branch, okay? In my case, in the new feature, I changed the main.py file, and in the main feature, in the main branch, I changed the file.txt file. You could have changed the same file, actually. I just wanted to change to change different ones. Just to show that in one case I was changing the Python code, and the other one someone might have been changing, let's say, the README file or something like that. That to emulate how would that work. Okay. Hope that makes sense. We don't have much time, so I'm gonna have to wrap up quickly. The important thing is now that I have those 2 branches and they're different, so new feature doesn't know the change that happened at the last commit of main, and main doesn't know the difference of the change that I made in new feature. I need to merge them. So here's where the merge command comes into place. So we have something like that. In our case, we have 1 commit at each, but here we have 1 at main and 2 at new feature. Doesn't really matter. And the idea is that I want one of the 2 branches to incorporate the changes of the other. Okay, remember when you do a merge, you are always merging another branch to the current branch. So let's start asking questions. Which branch am I? Can you answer? Or Yorgos, you might want to ask something. If you don't know which branch you're on, how can you know? Yes, thank you, Camila. So I'm in main. I can see that because I have the fancy terminal, but I could also say git status, and that would tell me in which branch I'm on. Okay. So the question is, do I want to incorporate the change of new feature to main, or do I want to incorporate the changes of main to new feature? That's based on how you're going to work. Uh, Yorgos, haven't you been working on that so far? Um, uh, okay, I'm gonna try to keep on with that because we really have to do this and we only have 5 minutes. And yeah, so as I said, with merge, you decide which feature you want, which branch you want to merge to which one. Okay, so normally you would want to merge something from another feature to main, right? So let's say a new feature was something experimental. We did that. Maybe we were working for that for days, and it's now time that we're saying, oh, it does look like a complete change now. We want to incorporate that change. How do I incorporate that to main? That means I have to go to main. If I wasn't in main, I should go and say git checkout main. Okay, of course I was already in main, so it doesn't change anything. And now I'm gonna ask Git to bring me any changes from new feature and incorporate those in main. So if you remember, main has removed a few lines from file.txt, but doesn't have the new lines on main.py. So if I do git merge new feature, what do I expect to happen? May I ask? Yeah, but what does that mean for the files in my case, let's say? But it means that the function that I added on new feature is going to now also, sorry? Yes, Camilo and Constantinos. Yes. So I expect now that I'm going to see the new function. Uh, so I will do that. It's going to ask me for a message again because this needs to make a new commit with both changes because this is a new snapshot, right? Before I had one snapshot with only the changes on file.txt, a snapshot with only the changes on main.py, and I'm going to make one snapshot which has both changes. So it asks me for a message and it pre-fills the message with this standard message, merge branch new feature into main. That's standard thing. So I don't have to do anything, just say, I'm fine with that personally, but maybe if you wanted, you could have changed this message. And I'm going to do colon WQ. And if I do git log graph, here's what I have now. I have main in a new commit, which has both changes basically, and now I can see how this diversion worked. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So if you look at that, that's what happened. I made a new commit over here, which has both the changes from this side and this side, and main has moved on there. Thank you, Luis. That's what I tried to avoid. So Git was clever and it realized that, well, it changed some lines in one case, in one branch, some lines in another branch, and well, there's no ambiguity there. I can just add or changes and make a new commit on my own, and it made that one. What Doberzone and Luis got is a conflict. And a conflict occurs basically when you change the same lines on both sides. So let's replicate that. Let's create a new branch. So I guess we should finish now, and in theory you could go for lunch. I'm not sure if you're okay that we just take 10 extra minutes to do a conflict, which is kind of important. And one of the most difficult things to tackle. And then I can dismiss you. Or you're dismissed anyway. Or you can just leave. Or you can just mute me. Or close the stream. But whatever. So I'm gonna go on with the conflict anyway, and hope you stick with me. Yes. So what is a conflict? As I said, it's like in both branches, you change the same thing. Yeah, also you're going to watch later in tweaks. So, um, did I make the, sorry, I got distracted. Okay, so I'm going to make a new branch, which I'm going to call the conflict branch. Yeah, of course, you would use more meaningful names than those. I'm just coming up with silly names. I'm going to check out the conflict branch. Sorry. Okay, understand L. I'm going to go here. And I'm gonna go to Visual Studio Code, and I'm gonna say something else. So I'm gonna change this line, git status, add git commit. So here's what I have now. Conflict branch is one step ahead. Let's do a similar change to main so that we produce a conflict. Done. Why are you doing this now? Sorry about that. Sorry, guys. How do I disable foot as well? Full screen. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna check out to main, and I'm gonna do a similar change. So remember how we named this something else? I'm gonna say here, this is main. Now notice what I just did. I changed the same line. Okay, one instructs Git to basically say this line should be now print this is main, and the other one instructed that this should be now print something else. Okay. Git status add main.py git commit. Sorry. Make main message meaningful. Now I'm just pretending now that I am being ignorant of what the other person or the other, yeah. So the person we're gonna have something similar, so you're gonna see how to solve this, okay? So Now I committed that. I do a git log graph all just to see what happened. Yes, indeed, I have the two branches. One is here, the other one is there. And now I'm gonna create this, I'm gonna try to merge those. So I'm gonna try to merge conflict every time. And it freaks out. It says auto merging conflict, merge conflict in main.py. Okay. If I do git status actually, it says unmerged path and both modified. That's how it says that both sites that I'm trying to merge, they have modified the same file and the same content. And it freaks out because it doesn't know how to fix that. And if you go to Visual Studio Code, you get this. This is similar to, I guess, what you got. So you probably changed the same, some one or maybe many lines that are similar in both sides. And as I said before, Git sees that in one side, I tell it that it should be print this is main, this line. And on the other side, I say this is print something else. And of course, it says, well, I am not a clever human being. I don't know what you wanted to do there. There's probably two different people with different interests there. Someone has to come in with some knowledge of programming, I guess, to fix that. Okay, so now, because I'm the unlucky person that happened to have to merge those, I have to decide what to do with that. And in this case, if that was actually code, I would have to figure out what one person did, what the other person did, why this was a conflict, and I would have to come up with some meaningful way of solving this. Okay, so those, of course, were silly examples because in this case, let's say this is just that I randomly changed some messages, but this could be like a function that was changed by one person and the other one was calling it, and the other one person added an argument, and I have to update my code that it works with his arguments and stuff, their argument. Okay, so how do you solve that? Actually, um, it would be nice if we could see how this is in raw. So if I do rim main.py, we could see what Git actually did. So it adds this extra line on the top and it says, here's what head was. So your current commit was saying this is main, stops there with this line, and then it shows the same version of that change from the merging branch. So this is what the conflict branch does. So all you have to do is decide what this snippet should be. You have, of course, to delete those things because this was only added there from Git to show you where was the conflict. And then you have to decide what to do with those two lines. Okay. Visual Studio Code is clever enough to give you some basic changes, like tell you if you want to accept the current change, so your side of the things, or if you want to accept the incoming change, so the other person's changes. So if I just want to keep either this is main or something else, I can just press accept current change, and I'm going to take mine, or I can undo that, and maybe I can say, my change didn't make any sense now. Probably the other person did it better or something, so I'm going to accept the other person's. Or I could just manually delete those things. I could maybe delete this line myself and then start coming up with something more meaningful. So for instance, I could keep both lines, let's say. That's a decision that you have to make based on what exactly you are doing, right? Now I'm just coming up with silly examples, and that doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to quit here without saving. So I changed it. I removed all the messy stuff that Git added there, and I'm ready now to finish the merge. So I need to add now main.py because I changed it, I fixed it, and I want to mark to Git that this is a conflict that is fixed. So I'm just going to say git add main.py. I'm doing git status again. See how now it says changes to be committed. It's green. It's like it's fine. So I told Git, I fixed what I had to do, and I'm ready to commit. And I'm going to do a commit. Same as before. The message is already pre-filled for me. If I wanted to do anything more meaningful here, I could add my own message. I'm going to keep it like that. So colon WQ, and I'm done. What do I get? I get the same thing. Okay. Now, conflicts are a bit overwhelming. It's kind of complicated, but actually, you might think that there's something broken, but actually, conflicts are something that we expect to happen. We want to happen. It's inevitable that it will happen. I mean, if many people are working at the same project, or if you haven't merged something for a while, more often than not, there will be the same lines that you have changed in both branches for one reason or another. So maybe while you're working a new feature, one of the important main functions that you have, and you might have changed in order to fix a bug, maybe in the new feature that you were working, you weren't aware of that. So inevitably, you will have those kinds of conflicts. Just keep calm. You check on Git status, which of the files are marked as both modified. Then you go to Visual Studio Code. You see these things that we saw before, like in the screenshot that the guys sent. And then you just have to remove this decoration of head and the lines and stuff, and you decide what your final file you want. What's the final file that you want to keep. So for instance, in your case, Doberson, you'd have, I guess, to decide whether you want to keep both the print hello ugly potato and print hello world, or maybe you want to delete one of the two, right? And of course, you have to remove your line 1, 3, and 8 in your case, because those were only added there from Git to denote what are the changes. I guess the same should happen for Luis, and I'm not sure if anyone else also had a conflict. Okay. Now, I'm not sure, but I guess you're still here. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now. We didn't do as much as I wanted to. We didn't see anything about GitHub. We didn't see how you change changes to GitHub. Clara, I don't know if we can find any spaces that we can do something additional, because we are a bit behind schedule. Okay, Konstantinos, I like your message. Okay, so Konstantinos, have you actually committed things to the different branches? So then you merge? Oh, you did. Okay, Konstantinos, probably what you did is you didn't make any changes in master. So, well, if you do something as simple as just, I mean, if one branch is just ahead of the other, then what happens is you only get fast forward. Um, that's like an example. Like, let's say this origin main. This is not, um, yeah, forget about it. So let's say this is one branch and this is another branch. If this second branch is just two commits ahead, then of course you don't have this divergent. Then Git will say, well, there's no point on making anything fancy. I'm just going to take main or master in your case and just going to take it like two steps forward. So that's probably what you did. You didn't change master in between. Yes, exactly. So that's why you don't see this divergence. The divergence happens only when you go to new feature, you change something there, then you go back to master, you change something there, and then you want to merge those two. Now for lashes, well, of course you have the PDF. I think Clara already shared it with you. And the PDF has an explanation of all the commands that we did and all the commands that we should have done, but of course we haven't done so far. I'm sorry about that. Um, and every command explains what happens with the graph. As I said, for me, the best way to end up in a state that you don't really get confused is think about how every command changes the tree. So commits are like those nodes and part of the graph, and then the nodes know the previous ones. You know that branches are pointers to those nodes, and you know that there's one special branch or so that's which is called head, and that points to normally branch. If you can put those things together every time that you run a command, then you can always troubleshoot anything weird that can happen. Um, so the commands are there on the PDF. I hope that's good enough. I guess you can rewatch the stream. I'm gonna download it and put it on YouTube or something. I will discuss with Clara how we can do that. And yeah, I think history is also something you can use to see what you did today. If that helps you. Well, I have 11,500 commands. Anyway, um, okay, one last thing before we go. Sometimes you might have a file that you don't want to track, right? So let's say during the break, someone pointed out that Visual Studio Code added a .vs Code folder, for instance. You can either just never add them manually, and then inevitably you will get this annoyance that every time you will have them as abstract files, and it's kind of annoying. So there's this special way where you can ask Git to ignore certain files. And that is through a file that is called git ignore. You can make that through Vim or Visual Studio Code, doesn't make any difference. So I'm going to emulate that. Let's say I make a configuration file. I'm going to call it main.config. Now, this is a configuration. As I said, it's a common sense that configuration we don't share because it's like if I'm working with someone else, I might have a different configuration than another person, and I don't want to, I mean, every time someone else changes something, they will have to change, I don't know, some pointers to files or database configuration, and then I will have to change as well. Inevitably, we'll have conflicts about something that we don't really need to exchange. We don't really need to exchange the configuration, okay? And of course, I will never add that. I don't plan to ever add that. So what I can do is that I can add the name of this file, main.config, in the file called gitignore. I can do this via Vim or Visual Studio Code. So I can here and I can say main.config. Okay, I'm gonna save that. So if I do git status now, interestingly, I see that gitignore now is an untracked file. If that's inevitable, gitignore maybe it's something that I want to share with others. So I'm gonna add gitignore because that's fine. But you see how even though I do have the main.config file, Git doesn't complain about that. Doesn't say it's an untracked file. It just ignores it because it's inside the git ignore. But git ignore, it's a good idea that I just share it with others. So I'm just going to add it, and I'm just going to say add git ignore. And from that point on, I start being self-complaining anymore. Okay. If I go to Visual Studio Code, you see this .gitignore file contains that. If you want to ignore a whole directory, like I don't remember who was it, who had a Visual Studio Code folder, you can do something like that. So in that case, Git will just look, and if the path starts with .VS Code, then it will just ignore that. So every file inside this folder is going to be ignored. Okay. You can also do things like ignore everything that ends to a config. That star is like a wild character. So that basically means ignore all files that end up in config suffix. Yeah, Anna has a point. If you are using LaTeX, for instance, so the same thing that applies with config normally applies with artifacts. If you have LaTeX, you probably have a tex file, and that's the most important one, maybe some class files and stuff. But when you build it, then LaTeX makes like 3 or 4 different files in the process, and you don't want to share those things because, like, as soon as you have the source code, every different person can produce those things. Those we call them artifacts. The same would have been with Python. Sometimes when you run a Python script, it might be the case that Python might compile them to files like PyC. I think they're called cache or compile or something like that. If you want to ignore all those, you just do that. You just wildcard.pyc, and that means that you don't have to be annoyed about that. And one good suggestion is that you can actually you can go to git ignore. So if you go to this address, I'm going to post it here. It has an example of many different common gitignore files. So if you're working with Python, you can find probably a Python gitignore. If you're working with LaTeX, you can find LaTeX or tex, sorry, just tex gitignore. Right? So those are common files that most probably you won't need when working, and you can just download this file or just copy the content of this file and put it inside your .gitignore, and that will make it less annoying in that case. Okay? Any questions? We're pretty late. I'm not sure how many people are still with us. I was hoping we would work with GitHub and GitLab and maybe do some push and pull. That's the last part that we should have done. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time. Clara, I hope we can arrange something. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, guys. I'm gonna stop the stream now. And, well, I can be around in the voice channel for a while if you need to ask me. Okay? Bye.